Maya Johnson adjusted her maternity uniform for the third time that morning, her 7-month pregnant belly making even the simplest tasks feel monumental. She'd been working at Henderson's fine dining for 3 years now, starting as a hostess and working her way up to assistant manager. But lately, everything had changed. Her boss, Richard Henderson, had always been demanding, but ever since she'd announced her pregnancy, his behavior had shifted from difficult to outright hostile. Today felt different though. Maya had her phone tucked discreetly in her apron pocket, voice recorder running. She'd been documenting everything for the past 2 weeks, just in case. Maya. Richard's voice boomed across the restaurant floor. Get in my office. Now. She exchanged glances with Carmen, one of the waitresses who'd become a close friend. Carmen gave her an encouraging nod as Maya made her way to the back office, one hand instinctively resting on her belly. Richard sat behind his oversized mahogany desk, his face already red with barely contained anger. Maya remained standing. He hadn't offered her a seat, as usual. I've been reviewing the schedules, he began, his voice dripping with contempt. And I'm putting you back on closing shifts. All of them. Maya's heart sank. Mr. Henderson, we discussed this. My doctor said I need adequate rest. Closing shifts mean I wouldn't get home until 2 a.m., and with my condition, your condition? He sneered. You mean your poor life choices? That's not my problem, Maya. You people always find excuses. You're lazy, looking for any reason not to work. Maya felt the familiar sting of his words, but she remained calm, knowing the phone in her pocket was capturing everything. Mr. Henderson, this isn't about being lazy. I've never missed a shift. I'm simply asking for reasonable accommodation as per company policy and the law. Richard stood up, his voice rising. Don't you quote the law to me, girl. I built this restaurant from nothing. I don't need some welfare queen telling me how to run my business. You should be grateful I even hired you in the first place. Do you know how many applications I had from qualified, professional people? But no, I gave you a chance, and this is how you repay me? Maya's hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. I've been Employee of the Month 5 times. I've increased table turnover by 30%. I've trained half the staff currently working here. Richard laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. Oh please. You think you're special? You're replaceable. Easily replaceable. There are a dozen girls who'd kill for your job, girls who won't get themselves knocked up and expect special treatment. He walked around the desk, getting uncomfortably close. Let me tell you something about your kind, Maya. You're all the same. Looking for handouts, playing the victim, getting pregnant to trap some man or game the system. It's pathetic. My kind, Mr. Henderson? Maya's voice was quiet but firm. You know exactly what I mean. Black, single, pregnant, the whole stereotype. You're a walking cliché. And don't think I don't know about your little friendship with Carmen and the others. You're probably turning them against me, filling their heads with your victim mentality. Richard returned to his chair, leaning back with a smug expression. Here's what's going to happen. You'll take the closing shifts, or you'll find yourself unemployed. And good luck finding another job looking like that. He gestured dismissively at her pregnant belly. Who's going to hire a pregnant woman with an attitude problem? Maya took a deep breath. I need to think about this. Think about it? Richard's face darkened. There's nothing to think about. You'll give me your answer by the end of your shift today, or don't bother coming back tomorrow. And if you're thinking about making trouble, filing complaints, talking to lawyers, let me remind you that I have connections in this city. I'll make sure you never work in the hospitality industry again. I'll blacklist you everywhere. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Nobody will believe you anyway. Who are they going to trust? A successful white businessman who's been in this community for 20 years, or an angry black woman with an agenda? Save yourself the embarrassment. Maya left the office with as much dignity as she could muster, her heart pounding. She went straight to the employee break room, locked the door, and let herself feel the weight of what had just happened. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of defeat, they were tears of anger and determination. She pulled out her phone and stopped the recording. 42 minutes of clear audio. Every slur, every threat, every discriminatory statement captured perfectly. Carmen knocked softly on the door. Maya? Are you okay? Maya opened the door and showed Carmen the phone. I got it all. Carmen's eyes widened. Everything? Everything. 2 weeks of recordings. Today was the worst, but I have a pattern documented. That evening, Maya sat at her small kitchen table with her laptop, external hard drive, and the advice of her cousin Jerome, who worked as a paralegal. This is solid, Maya, Jerome said, listening to the recordings with growing disbelief. This is textbook discrimination, racial, pregnancy, and potentially disability discrimination given your medical needs. Plus, the threats about blacklisting you could constitute retaliation. What do I do now? Maya asked. First, we make copies. Multiple copies. Cloud storage, external drives, email them to yourself. Then we contact an employment lawyer. I know someone good, Diane Richardson. She specializes in discrimination cases and works on contingency for cases like this. I can't afford. Contingency means she only gets paid if you win. And Maya, with evidence like this? You're going to win. Over the next 3 days, Maya worked with attorney Diane Richardson, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a reputation for taking down corporate bullies. This is one of the clearest cases I've seen in years, Diane said during their first meeting. The recordings alone are damning, but we need to build a comprehensive case. Do you have witnesses? Maya nodded. Carmen will testify. So will Marcus, one of the line cooks. Richard has been inappropriate with others too, but they were too scared to speak up. We'll also subpoena company records, performance reviews, schedules, any written communications. I want to show a pattern of excellent work on your part and escalating hostility from Henderson after your pregnancy announcement. Diane leaned back in her chair. Maya, I want to be clear about something. This is going to get ugly. Henderson will hire expensive lawyers. They'll try to discredit you, dig into your personal life, paint you as a disgruntled employee. Are you prepared for that? Maya placed both hands on her belly, feeling her baby kick. My child deserves to grow up in a world where people like Richard Henderson are held accountable. I'm ready. Attorney Richardson filed a comprehensive complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, and simultaneously filed a lawsuit in civil court. The complaint outlined racial discrimination under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, pregnancy discrimination under the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, failure to provide reasonable accommodation, hostile work environment, retaliation threats. The lawsuit included not just Henderson personally, but also Henderson's Fine Dining LLC, seeking damages for emotional distress, lost wages, and punitive damages. The day the lawsuit was filed, Maya received a furious call from Richard Henderson. She let it go to voicemail, another recording for the collection. You ungrateful. The message was filled with more racial slurs and threats. You'll regret this. I'll destroy you. Maya forwarded the voicemail directly to attorney Richardson. Perfect, Diane said. He's digging his own grave. Word of the lawsuit began to spread. A local investigative journalist, Sarah Chen, reached out to Maya for an interview. After consulting with her attorney, Mia agreed. The story ran with the headline, Local Restaurant Owner Accused of Racist Tirade Against Pregnant Employee, and she has the tapes. The article included carefully selected excerpts from the recordings, reviewed by the attorney to ensure they didn't compromise the case, and interviews with former employees who came forward with their own stories of Henderson's discrimination. The story went viral. Within 48 hours, #BoycottHendersons was trending locally. Protesters gathered outside the restaurant. Reservations were cancelled en masse. Richard Henderson appeared on local TV, attempting damage control. These allegations are completely false. Maya Johnson was a problematic employee who we were planning to terminate for performance issues. This is clearly a shakedown. But when Sarah Chen played portions of the recordings during a follow-up segment, Henderson's denials crumbled before the public's eyes. During the discovery phase of the lawsuit, attorney Richardson's team uncovered even more damaging evidence. Email chains showing Henderson making racist jokes about employees, records showing Maya was consistently rated as one of the top performers, documentation of other pregnant employees who'd been demoted or fired, financial records showing discrepancies in pay between white and minority employees in similar positions, text messages between Henderson and the head chef containing derogatory comments about Maya. Henderson's legal team tried everything, filing motions to dismiss, claiming the recordings were obtained illegally. They weren't. Maryland was a one-party consent state, arguing that his comments were taken out of context. None of it worked. The publicity surrounding the case emboldened other former employees. Attorney Richardson's office was flooded with calls from people wanting to add their stories to the case. Jessica Martinez, a Latina server who'd worked at Henderson's 3 years ago, came forward with her own story. He told me I should go back to Mexico when I asked for time off for my grandmother's funeral. I was born in Baltimore. Marcus Thompson, the line cook, testified about being passed over for promotion repeatedly despite his qualifications, watching as less experienced white employees were elevated instead. Even some white former employees testified about the hostile, discriminatory environment they'd witnessed but felt powerless to stop. Attorney Richardson filed an amended complaint, expanding the case to include a pattern and practice of discrimination affecting multiple employees. As the case gained national attention, the pressure on Henderson intensified from multiple directions. The restaurant's landlord, faced with negative publicity and protesters affecting other businesses in the building, began discussing non-renewal of the lease. Henderson's suppliers started quietly distancing themselves, not wanting their brands associated with the scandal. His insurance company, reviewing the case, informed him that his policy might not cover punitive damages in discrimination cases, meaning he'd be personally liable. Henderson's wife, who'd been unaware of the extent of his behavior, filed for separation after listening to the recordings that had been made public in court filings. His adult daughter, a college student, released a statement saying she was horrified and ashamed of her father's actions. 3 months into the litigation, Henderson's legal team approached attorney Richardson about settlement. Their first offer was insultingly low, $50,000 and a non-disclosure agreement. Tell them we'll see them in court, Diane told Maya. The offers gradually increased, $100,000. Then $250,000. Then $500,000. Each time, there was a non-disclosure agreement attached. They wanted Maya's silence. What do you want to do? Diane asked Maya. We can probably get more if we go to trial, especially with punitive damages. But trials are stressful, especially with a new baby coming. Maya, now 8 months pregnant, considered carefully. What happens to the other employees if I just take the money and stay quiet? Nothing, Diane admitted. The individual claims might proceed, but without the publicity your case has generated, they'll have less leverage. Maya shook her head. Then no deal. Not with an NDA. I want what happened to me on the record. I want other women, other people of color, to know they can fight back. The trial began on a crisp October morning. Maya, who'd given birth to a healthy baby girl named Hope 2 weeks earlier, sat in the courtroom with her mother watching Hope in the gallery behind her. Henderson's lawyers presented their defense. Maya was a problematic employee. The recordings were taken out of context. Henderson's comments were crude but not discriminatory. The scheduling changes were legitimate business decisions, but when attorney Richardson played the recordings in full for the jury, the impact was undeniable. Several jury members visibly recoiled at Henderson's words. Carmen's testimony was powerful. I watched Maya come in every day, work harder than anyone else, and get treated like dirt. And it got worse after she got pregnant. Mr. Henderson would make comments constantly about her body, about her being on welfare, about her baby's father. It was disgusting. Attorney Richardson brought in Dr. Patricia Williams, an industrial organizational psychologist who specialized in workplace discrimination. The recordings demonstrate classic discriminatory animus, Dr. Williams testified. Mr. Henderson's comments explicitly link negative stereotypes about race and pregnancy to his employment decisions. His references to your kind, welfare queen, and stereotype are direct evidence of discriminatory intent. This isn't ambiguous. This is textbook discrimination. A labor economist testified about Maya's lost earning potential. Ms. Johnson was on track for promotion to general manager. Based on industry standards and her performance record, the discrimination has cost her approximately $400,000 in lost wages and benefits over the next 10 years. Henderson took the stand in his own defense, a decision his lawyers clearly regretted. Under cross-examination, he became defensive and angry, at one point saying, I hired her, didn't I? If I was really racist, I wouldn't have hired her in the first place. Attorney Richardson pounced, so hiring a black woman gives you license to abuse her? Is that your testimony? That's not what Henderson sputtered. You said, and I quote, you should be grateful I even hired you. Why should Ms. Johnson be grateful for being hired for a job she was qualified for? Henderson had no good answer. Attorney Richardson's closing argument brought several jury members to tears. Maya Johnson came to work every single day, despite being pregnant, despite being exhausted, despite being verbally abused by her boss. She did her job excellently, the evidence shows that. She asked for one thing, basic human dignity and the reasonable accommodations that the law requires for pregnant workers. Instead, Richard Henderson subjected her to a campaign of racial and pregnancy-based harassment. But Maya did something brave. She documented it. She stood up. She refused to be silent. This case isn't just about Maya. It's about every worker who's ever been told they should be grateful for being hired. Every pregnant woman who's been treated as less than human. Every person of color who's been subjected to racist stereotypes and told to accept it. The evidence is clear. The recordings speak for themselves. We're asking you to send a message. This behavior is not acceptable. It will not be tolerated. And there are consequences. Henderson's attorney tried to paint him as a flawed but not malicious man, but it was too late. The damage was done. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. They found Richard Henderson and Henderson's Fine Dining LLC liable on all counts. Racial discrimination, pregnancy discrimination, hostile work environment, retaliation. The damages: $150,000 in lost wages and benefits, $500,000 in compensatory damages for emotional distress, $2.5 million in punitive damages. The courtroom erupted. Maya burst into tears, hugging attorney Richardson. Her mother held baby Hope, whispering, "Your mama did that." Your mama stood up. Henderson sat motionless, his face ashen, outside the courthouse. Maya read a prepared statement to the assembled media. I didn't do this for the money. I did this because what Richard Henderson did to me was wrong. Wrong morally, wrong legally. I did this for every person who's ever been made to feel less than human at their workplace. I did this for my daughter, so she grows up knowing that when you stand up for what's right, justice is possible. The verdict made national headlines. It became a case study in employment law courses. The recordings were used in discrimination training seminars as examples of textbook harassment. Henderson's Fine Dining closed permanently 3 months after the verdict. Henderson filed for bankruptcy, though questions remained about assets he'd allegedly transferred to family members before the trial. The other former employees who'd come forward reached their own settlements, emboldened by Maya's victory. Maya used a portion of her settlement to set up a college fund for Hope, pay off her mother's medical debts, donate to legal aid organizations that help workers fight discrimination. A year after the verdict, Maya was working as a regional manager for a national restaurant chain, a position she'd been recruited for after the publicity from her case. Her new employers valued her expertise and her courage. She became a sought-after speaker, talking to workers' rights groups, law school classes, and women's organizations about standing up to discrimination. People asked me if I was scared, she told an audience at a women's leadership conference. Of course I was scared. I was pregnant, I needed the job, I was worried about my future. But I was more scared of teaching my daughter to accept injustice. I was more scared of letting fear silence me. Carmen opened her own small cafe, with Maya as an investor and advisor. They called it Hope's Place, and its mission statement included a commitment to dignity and respect for all employees. Marcus got his long-overdue promotion at his new restaurant, where his talents were finally recognized. Richard Henderson never publicly apologized. In occasional interviews, he maintained he'd been unfairly targeted. But his reputation was permanently destroyed. The recordings ensured that his name would forever be associated with workplace discrimination. Maya's case led to changes. The restaurant chain that employed Maya company-wide implemented stricter anti-discrimination training and clear pregnancy accommodation policies. Local legislators, inspired by the case, strengthened protections for pregnant workers in Maryland. Other workers who'd been suffering in silence found the courage to document and report their own discrimination 3 years after. The verdict: Maya received a letter. It was from a young woman named Angela who'd been facing similar discrimination at her job. "I listened to your story," Angela wrote. "I started recording too. My case just settled. I couldn't have done it without your example. Thank you for being brave enough to go first." Maya kept that letter on her desk as a reminder of why she'd fought so hard. Maya sat in her home office, reviewing reports for her new position as VP of Human Resources for a major hospitality corporation. Her job was specifically focused on creating inclusive, discrimination-free workplaces. Hope, now 6 years old, ran into the office. "Mommy, can you help me with my homework?" "Of course, baby. What do you need?" "We have to write about someone brave." "Can I write about you?" Maya pulled her daughter onto her lap. "What makes you think I'm brave?" "Grandma told me. She said you stood up to a mean man when everyone told you to be quiet. She said you recorded him and took him to court and won." Maya smiled. "Grandma talks a lot, huh? She says I should be like you. Never let anyone make me feel small." Maya hugged her daughter tight. "That's right, baby. You are brilliant and strong and worthy of respect. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. And if they do, record them." Hope giggled. Maya laughed. "Well, hopefully it never comes to that. But yes, document everything, stand up for yourself, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right." That night, after Hope was asleep, Maya pulled out the old recordings one last time. She rarely listened to them anymore. The memories were still painful, but tonight felt different. She listened to Richard Henderson's voice, full of contempt and hatred. Then she listened to her own voice, calm, dignified, strong even in the face of abuse. She thought about the young woman she'd been, scared and pregnant, standing in that office with a phone in her pocket, making the brave choice to document the truth. She thought about all the people who'd been inspired by her story to stand up to their own discrimination. She thought about Hope, growing up in a world that was slowly, painfully, learning that actions have consequences and that justice, though difficult, is possible. Maya deleted the recordings from her phone. She didn't need them anymore. They'd served their purpose. The official court records would preserve them for posterity, but she didn't need to carry them in her pocket any longer. She was free. Author's note: this story is fiction, but it reflects real experiences faced by countless workers who endure discrimination, harassment, and retaliation in the workplace. While documenting discrimination can be a powerful tool for justice, anyone facing workplace discrimination should consult with an employment attorney and understand their local laws regarding recording conversations. Resources for those facing discrimination include the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, local civil rights organizations, and employment law attorneys who often work on contingency for clear discrimination cases.